Welcome to InkSoft and our webinar, 5 Tips to Streamline Shop Production. And my name is Marshall Atkinson, and you can reach me at any time at marshall@inksoft.com. And here's my phone number. I'd love to talk to you or email, any type of issues you have. I'd love to hear from you. So feel free to jot that down. And at the end of the webinar, I'll post it again. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the macro view of increasing your shop efficiency through understanding 5 different things. Your shop capacity, eliminating bottlenecks, eliminating downtime, reviewing problem orders, and then, of course, setting expectations. There's also another webinar I've done that's related to this, which is the 5 secrets to efficient shop production, which is all about making the things in your shop run just a little better. And you can reach that at this YouTube address. And it's kind of a long thing. So if you want to know that, just email me later and I'll send you the link. So let's get going here and talk about the first thing, which is capacity. I think a lot of shops, when I talk to them, they don't really understand their capacity of their shop, which really becomes a problem when they're trying to figure out their production schedule and getting things aligned so orders ship on the right day. So capacity is also really about understanding your shop speedometer. And there's 2 things that are influenced by this. And one is your capacity for your staff. Okay, so shops have lots of great equipment, but more than that, they've got people, and the people are needed to do the work. So capacity, part of the equation, is really about understanding your people more than anything. So the first thing to think about is, do they have the skill to do the work? And this seems like an obvious thing, but sometimes I think we overload our crews. We don't know, they don't really have the understanding. For instance, sales sells a discharge job, but we've never done discharge before. So instead of an easy 200-piece order, it becomes an all-afternoon affair with learning how to do that. So do they have the skill to do the work? That's the thing you have to really ask. Next is, do they want to do the work? And a great example of this is somebody who might be a catcher or a puller, and we decide, you know what, we need more press operators. We're going to move you into that position. Maybe they don't want to do that. Finding people to run our screen reclaiming department is another thing. Nobody wants to essentially do dishes all day. So maybe they're not really as fast as they need to be in that area. So there's a kind of a backlog of screens that need to be cleaned. So that's another key area. The third one is, do they have the time to do the work? So a lot of problems happen because we want all this stuff to happen correctly and on time, but guess what? We don't give them the necessary amount of time. So you've got a 5,000-piece order and the shirts just come in at noon and it's got to ship today. Chances are that there's not enough time. That isn't going out the way we want it to. So those are the 3 things when we think about our people and our capacity. Let's think about our skill. Do they want to do the work, and do they have the necessary time? So when we're also thinking about capacity, it's capacity for equipment. Okay, and this is, what is the average daily output? So you really kind of need to know this. And so the reason you want to know this is you can predict in the future how long things will take. What can I do? And don't use some crazy number that you want to hit. We should be printing at 650 an hour, or we should be able to print 5,000 impressions a day. Yeah, you should be, but are you? So what is your average daily output for each of your presses? If you know that, it's easy to predict what your production schedule might look like. The next is, what is the percentage of time our machines are running? So we have an 8-hour day, subtract breaks and lunch and everything, is probably about 7.4 hours a day. So how much of that time is spent actually printing? Because we only get paid only make money when our machines are running. We don't make any money during setups or anything else. So if you can have more uptime, that means you're a more effective shop, and you could probably be booking more orders. So you want to really look at your percent of uptime. And next, what are the technical limits for the machine? This is all about should you be able to do? Can you run it faster? Can you put, can you do an 8-color job on a 6-color press? No. So what are the technical limits for the machine? If you understand these 3 things for your equipment, your average daily output, your percent uptime, and what can you actually possibly do with the machine, you can start predicting, your production schedule a little better. It's all based on your capacity, okay? So the thing that we really need, the tool that we need to figure this out is our production logs, okay? And why? Is because you can't manage what you don't measure. So if you don't know what your average production time is, or how long it takes to set up a screen, or what is your downtime, and how many misprints you're making, if you don't know this stuff, it's really going to be hard to adjust things later because you're just guessing, okay? So I'm going to show you a production log that I designed probably, I don't know, 2 decades ago. This is an Excel spreadsheet. If you'd like this form, I'll happily send it to you. Just shoot me an email, marshall@inksoft.com, and I'll forward it to you. But let's review it real quick. Everything should go on a row, okay? So the yellow row here is for each print location. So if you've got a 2-location job, the front would go on the top, the back could be the one just underneath that. You want to record these separately because generally speaking, they're different entire things. So the front was 2 colors, the back is 4 colors. It requires different setups, different times, different everything. You could even print them on different presses, okay? So this production log is really for one shift for one press. It could be a manual press, could be a screen print press, an automatic press. If you're doing embroidery, this would look a little differently because this is really about screen printing. But the one job per row, okay? And then it really starts off with, if you've got an order number or the name of the job, goes in this first column. Next is your quantity. So this is the amount that you're doing. The third column is the number of screens. So, a 3-color front, 4-color back. You don't put 7, you put 3 for the front in that row, and 4 would go where the back is on the different row, okay? And then also, let's say it's a 1/1, and you're printing on a manual job, a manual press, you would just write 1 down for the front and 0 for the back if you're using the same screen. And what you want at the end of the day is that the red little box there is you put the total in there. This allows you to keep track of how many screens you're actually using on your production floor every day, which helps you figure out your screen room, how many screens you're using, that type of stuff. So it's really easy to track if you're doing it this way. Next is your setup time. So your setup time is the moment you start setting up the job till the manager approves it. So if it only takes you 4 minutes of screen to set up, but it takes 15 minutes for your manager to walk over there to sign off on it, all that should be reflected in that time in that space, okay? So what we really want is our managers or whoever's approving the job right there when they're ready with the strike off to approve it, to keep our downtime low, okay? That's really important. But what we're doing here is we're measuring from the moment they start, let's say 8 o'clock, to the moment they're done, let's say 8:20. So that's that 20 minutes that took you to set up. Okay, it's really important that you measure that. The next is your production time. This is from the moment you started running the job till you printed the last shirt. Okay, so let's say that was at 8:20 and you're printing all the way till 10:30. 10:30 is when you stopped with the last shirt. You put 10:30 in here. And the reason you want this is you want to know how long things take to do. Okay. The next column is the number of impressions for the job. Then you've got production misprints, and then you got production defects. Production misprints is, of course, when you goof it up. That's a misprint. A defect is there's a hole in the shirt, the pocket wasn't sewn right, the hem of the sleeve was messed up or something. That's a defect. Okay, so you want to keep those separate, because one of those you can hopefully prevent. The other one you really can't, but you want to keep track of that to make sure you're pulling that out. This column is, of course, your downtime. Now, downtime is any moment that you aren't printing, you aren't running the job. So you stop to clear out a fuzzball, you stop to add ink into the white screen, you stop to do anything, you record it as downtime. And then the last section, of course, is an area for notes. So you could put had to stop because of this, or client was here approving a job and they had to have a screen reburned or whatever. You put notes in there. And the reason that you want to do this is to keep track of what's going on and to understand things, because a lot of times people are looking at these production logs days or maybe the week after, and you kind of want to know what was going on. Now, let me tell you, it's really important that we get this information, but I would advise that you only use these production logs if you're going to do something with the information. They're a real pain for your people to fill out. It's a real problem for somebody to work through these and keep track of this information and put it in a spreadsheet and do something with it. So if you're not really going to do anything with it, I would advise not doing it. You don't have to do these every day for the whole year, okay? But what you want to do is maybe do it for a month or a couple weeks, and that way that can establish your baseline speed, and then maybe the next quarter you do it for a little bit and you see if there's any gain, you're doing things differently. Maybe that's a little easier for you, okay? So production logs are a great tool to understand your average shop speed in real time with all these different things. And then somebody, David Anderson, just asked, how do we aggregate all the downtime, fuzzball, scheduled break, pinhole, that kind of stuff? You don't record scheduled breaks, you just leave them out of your time. But anytime your press is not running because of a fuzzball, a pinhole, customer approval, that goes in that downtime section. And then there's a notes section if you have a couple for the job. You want to record the time, okay? Because what you're trying to figure out is how much of your day is spent not doing value-added stuff, which is printing, okay? So it's really important that you record all of this stuff, and that way you can work to resolve it. How can we keep things better? Like, for instance, fuzzballs are caused by lint. So I've been to plenty of shops where the presses look like they're a bunch of sheep that need shearing because there's so much lint on it. Well, that lint drips down or gets into the screen, and then that causes the fuzzballs in the ink, and that transfers to the shirt. Or even worse is how many people's ink departments don't have lids for their ink buckets, so all the ink, the lint gets into the ink, and then it gets stirred up and put into the screens. So, you know, your ink bucket should be perfectly clean with a lid, without the goop sticking in it. And that way you won't have problems with fuzzballs in your ink, and that way you're never stopping for that. So that's just a quick little tip. So let's move on to the next section, which is eliminating bottlenecks, okay? This is all starting with the question, why? So when you have a bottleneck, which is something in your shop that isn't quite working in production, you want to start asking why a lot, okay? So in this section, I've got a couple different little examples I want to talk about so you can learn how to ask why, okay? So the first one is, our example is screens not ready for production. This happens a lot, and it happens for various reasons, but what we want is when we're ready to stage that job, the guy or girl in production should better go get those screens and take them to the press, and they're ready when we need them, okay? So why isn't that happening? Is it because there's a problem with the art due date? So what we want to do is we want to think about, does everybody know when we want to start production for that job? Okay, so today's Tuesday. Let's say we wanted to run a job on Friday. Everybody knows we're running a job on Friday. In your shop, when should those screens be ready for production? Okay. So in my mind, we want all this type of stuff ready one business day before screen printing needs them, which would be Thursday. So that means when is the art due? The art due from the client for approval should be on Wednesday, which means that the artist should be creating the art either yesterday or today to make sure that it happens in order that we need it. So there has to be a lot of planning. There has to be some good communication. Next is there isn't a priority in the screen room, okay? So what happens is the work orders, they get them and they just put them in a big pile on somebody's desk and they just take the next one off the top and they burn the screens. That isn't a priority way to figure out what screen printing needs, okay? So you need to develop a system in your shop where the screen room knows the priority for production, so you're burning the screens in the correct order, and that happens through communication. That happens by knowing the day that production needs to start them. It happens just by having these production manager talk to the screen room manager and just give a simple list written on a piece of paper. Hey, here are the 10 jobs I really need today. It doesn't have to be super elaborate, but what you need is you need them to prioritize their day, because chances are you can't get everything all done at once. And we want to make sure things are done in advance. Another reason why screens aren't ready is because they don't have the right mesh counts. How many times have you wanted to you need an underbase screen and the 110s aren't ready and you had to use a 156 instead? You know, it's like one of these things where you need to make sure your screen room manager is really looking ahead. What are my screens? What do I need? What are we doing with reclaiming, cleaning, coating, and getting everything ready to make sure he's got a full library of screens that are ready to go. And the only way that's going to happen is we're constantly looking for that. And so we have to start with why. When your screen room manager says, hey, we're out of this mesh, okay, that's his problem in managing. And we need to figure out how we're going to resolve that. Okay, next is not enough time for post-production. These days, a lot of times we have a lot of things we have to do after we decorate the shirts. So we have to put hang tags on them. We have to fold them. Maybe they go into polybagging. Maybe they're going to be bundled with a hat and they got a rubber band that has to go around it, or it's a big order that has to be segregated through a spreadsheet or some sort of, you know, by classes or something. So it's one of these things that this requires time. So what we need to do is we need to really think about things and make sure our departments are communicating with each other. So when you have an order that has this type of work, the people doing this need to let the production crews know, hey, I need to make sure that that order for the high school is done on Thursday because I have to box it up on Friday so it'll ship out Monday. We need that to happen. So we're hitting the dates that we need. And so you can't rely on people just looking at the schedule and making their own assumptions about it. You need really good communication about this stuff. And it can't be finger pointing stuff. It has to be good, positive, hey, help me out type of stuff. The next, of course, is already mentioned, which is using the ship date and working backwards. So if post-production has to do stuff, how long does that take? So when do they need the shirts to be able to start so it can ship on the date that it needs to go? So you have to work backwards from that, and everybody has to agree on that, okay? So that's a big hassle sometimes. It requires lots of communication and effort, but it's a must to do if you need to resolve this type of challenge. And then the next thing is, how long do things take? How many shirts an hour does your polybagger crew handle? How many shirts an hour can you hang tag? Okay, so if you know what that is, then it's easy to figure out how many hours it's going to take, or how many people I need, or how many polybagging machines I need, that type of stuff. So you can figure out how long it's going to take you to do this stuff, so you can be working backwards on your ship date to make sure it ships out on time. So, all right, the next one is work crews don't know what to do next. Okay, this is a big problem with shops that aren't quite as organized as they really ought to be. So what we need to do is we need to think about how we can get them the answers that they need. So first off is that tomorrow's jobs are staged today. Okay, so what this means is today's production you can't touch. Okay, you can't add another job, you can't do anything to it, because what we're doing is we're focusing on getting all this stuff out that we got to do today. And what we're doing today is we're staging jobs that have to start tomorrow. Okay, so that's our work today. So when your production managers come in the morning, they get everybody set, make sure all the machines are running, and then everything's good to go. And then they start building their production schedule for tomorrow, which means they're going to be unboxing stuff. They're going to be putting screens, they're pulling the ink. They got to get that one Pantone color mixed. They're doing everything they can for tomorrow. They're doing that today. So when tomorrow hits, it's all done. Okay. And as long as you work that way, things are much easier. And as you can see in the picture behind there, I've got some shirts on a cart. I've got everything folded, ready to go. You can see the job sheet on top. You got the screens underneath. Next to the, out of the picture, you can't see it, but next to the press is a table that's got all the ink buckets lined up, ready to go for all these jobs. Okay, so all the production operator has to do is to take down the job he's working on, use this stuff, set up the next job, print it, take it down, start over. Everything is arranged in the exact order that it needs to happen. Okay, all the decisions are made by somebody else. And guess what? That guy doesn't have to walk and go find out what he's doing next. He doesn't go look for a screen. He's not in the ink room trying to find PMS 286. Everything is done for him, so you eliminate a lot of your downtime. Okay. The next idea is use a published schedule. Okay. So each press should have a list of the 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or how many jobs they're doing today of what they're supposed to do. And so you have this, it's based on their capacity, right? How much do they normally do? You can figure it out. And then what you do is your production managers, as they're walking the floor, if they know that the guy has to print, let's say 10 jobs, by lunchtime, 5 of those should be done, just as an example. So if he's mid-morning break around 10 o'clock, if he's still on the first one, you know he's not going to do the rest. Okay, so if we have a published schedule, we have everything lined up, we know exactly what we're doing, we're giving everybody the expectations of what we're supposed to do today, you're going to push more stuff out. Okay, and then this last one is no thinking, line up the work for them. I just kind of talked about that. So we want to make sure that everybody understands what they have to do by presenting it in front of them, so they don't have to kind of decide or question anything. All right. So the next section here is called eliminating bottlenecks. And we're going to also start with why. And we're going to ask our employees about their challenges. Okay. So I use EE as employees. It's just an easy way to shorthand that. So as you're walking around, you want to be, what are they struggling with? I remember one time I was working in a shop and I saw this guy, he was working at a computer workstation. He was all frustrated and he was restarting the computer. And I go, what's going on here? It's like this, and he was complaining about the computer. And I go, well, is this a big problem? He goes, yeah, I got to do this like 3 or 4 times a day. And I said, well, how long's that been going on? It's like 6 months. So for 6 months, 3 or 4 times a day, this guy's been restarting his computer. It's instead of just getting it fixed or getting him a new workstation, that much of his day has been spent with this frustrating thing because he didn't want to speak up and nobody really asked. Okay, so it's really kind of my fault. So it's like one of these things where you have to ask these people, what are they struggling with? What can you do to make them a success? So you have to constantly do this. And there's a term for this, it's called manage by walking around. I don't know if you ever heard that. But you got to be there. You can't manage production from your corner office. You got to be out in production, asking people, figuring it out, helping them out. The next idea here is look to ergonomics. How do they move and work? Okay, so watch your people work. Are they? Is it easy for them to do their job? Or are they struggling with it? Okay, so the picture behind this. Okay, you can see it's a piece of masking tape that's over a registration mark on a screen. Okay, so one of the things is a lot of times, you know, we put this tape on a screen and it sits there for a week or however longer it takes to reclaim the screen, and this tape becomes really difficult to come off. So you've seen people with their fingernail, or even worse is a putty knife, because that will rip the screen, trying to get this tape off, okay? But when we put the tape on, if we fold the corner over, like it is right there in the upper left, it allows a nice place to put your fingers, and you can just rip it off, okay? So if we're looking at people, how they work, and then trying to decide, hey, can we improve that? And then really talking to them about things, you'll find out that you can make some changes like this that are really small, but they can make a really big impact because you're making their job easier and they can do more during the day. So you just have to pay attention and ask them what's going on and watch how they work. And the next kind of idea is when people are struggling, okay, are they struggling with the equipment because there's something wrong with it, like that workstation? Or is it training, like they don't know how to use it, or maybe they're half trained, okay? So they're a little slower. So when we're looking at increasing our speed and eliminating our bottlenecks, find out if the equipment is working properly, okay? Or do people need some more training? And here's another thing. Even if you've shown somebody, like just the other day, how to use it, and you got to use it again, absolutely don't say, hey, Fred, I just showed you this yesterday, okay? Because once you start with that type of stuff, he'll never come to you again for help, right? So when we focus on setting up, we want to make sure that we have everything ready. So we have the screens, we have the ink, we have the work order, we have everything we want to do. And also, you could take advantage of technology these days because, for instance, if you use any type of CTS system, like the M&RI image, you can have it hooked up with Trilock, which allows you to set up faster on your presses because all your screens are already registered to each other, and you just use the jig to set up. So using your production logs, you can drop your production setup time from 7 to 10 minutes to under 5. And by the way, 5 minutes per screen is the average time it should take you to set your job up from beginning to end. So with 3-color, should only take you 15 minutes. So if it's taking you 20 or 30, you've got big problems. So let's make sure that you're focusing on eliminating the downtime problems with your setup. And you can do that just by being there and observing and kind of looking to see what are you struggling with, okay? So the next thing is no stopping during the print run, okay? So this means every single time you stop to get that fuzzball out, you stop to put white ink in the underbase screen, you stop to do anything, put more shirts on the table or your cart, okay? You know what you're not doing? You're not printing, okay? So there should be no stopping during the run. So in your shop, how can you achieve that? Do you need an extra person to float around to help with this? Can your managers help with this? Can you do a lot to create the culture that we want to not stop? And it's a big problem, and everybody's super vocal with, hey, I need more shirts over here, and somebody comes over and fixes it before they run out of shirts. So you need to get that going by making sure everybody's playing along as a team and not stopping, okay? And then the next thing is taking the job down, okay? So when we're taking a job down, what's going on? What is the activity in that crew, okay? So the catcher's probably doing the final totals. You got your press operator probably taking everything down quickly and starting to set up the next job. The assistant or the puller is probably carting the ink off, okay? But you know what? I know a lot of shops that have an extra person that will allow them to do this faster because, you know, instead of 2 people doing this at the press with the screens, maybe there's a 3rd person, and then they can get everything down and then the next job up faster by looking at how they're doing things. So if you were to add 1 extra person to this, okay, how many more jobs a day could you do because you've eliminated a chunk of your downtime? Okay, so if you're only paying somebody maybe $10 or $12 an hour or whatever you pay them in your area, you know, it might make sense because you're getting out way more value for your day, which makes having that person on your production floor just makes much more sense. Okay, so don't step over a dollar. I mean, step over a dime to pick up a dollar. You know, all right. So next is we want to be proactive. So what does that mean? Okay, that means there is no waiting. Okay, so a lot of times in our shops, you know, stuff happens. You know, one of the jokes is, you know, production happens, and this really means sometimes during our a day, you know, we might bust a screen on the press, or you might have a client who comes in to do a spot check, press check, and then there's a delay. While we're waiting for this stuff, is there something that these people can be printing? You know, is there a 50-piece one-color job? Even though you're running your big auto, right, and normally you print that manually, can you pull that over there real quick, and while you're waiting on that screen to get burned, can you bust the job out instead of having these people stand around? Okay, so this is a leadership decision by your production crew to kind of figure this stuff out to make sure that we're doing things the right way. Okay, so we can be working ahead, you know. So if today is Tuesday and you've got a little lull, you could print a job on Wednesday. You could print a job that was supposed to go Thursday. Just, you got to keep things moving, keep things going. So what you want to do is you want to keep that idea that there is no waiting. We're not waiting around. And then if you've got that 50-piece job running and that screen finally comes out of the screen room, okay, finish the 50-piece job, and then you can throw it back in, and then you can finish that one job you were working on, okay? But don't just stand around. Next is staging tomorrow's jobs today, okay? I can't emphasize this enough, okay? When we're looking at our production schedule and we're thinking about what we're doing, when we put stuff by our production crews in the order it has to be done, and we're staging everything for tomorrow, today, we're making sure that we know what we're doing, okay? To be able to do this requires a lot of balance, requires a lot of thinking, it requires a lot of looking ahead to make sure that we've got screens and inventory. We know we need ink, we need whatever we need. We got everything ready to go, and if we don't, then we're going to solve that problem, but we're doing it today, okay? So tomorrow rolls around, there isn't a problem because we've already solved all the problems, okay? If it isn't a problem, then we've got an answer working on. Maybe, for example, like maybe there's a job that has to print that doesn't have the mediums because they haven't come in yet, okay? You've already got an answer working on that. And so by the time the day rolls around, maybe it's figured itself out. Maybe you got to push it off to the next day, but you're not waiting for today to resolve it, okay? And then here's the production mantra I want you guys to learn. And it's always do these in this order: rush jobs first, then late jobs, then current jobs, and then anything for the future. Okay, so if you do them in this order, and this is the thinking that your production crews have, you're going to get to a production schedule that's predictable, that you're not late, that everything goes according to time. Okay, so let's talk about this. The reason you want to do your rush jobs first is because usually somebody has paid money for that rush job. That has to go. If it doesn't go on the day that they paid for, it's going to be a gigantic disaster. So those always go first. In fact, I would make sure, if you can, do them the day before. At least set them up, get them to the press, get them registered. So the first thing in the morning, all you do is turn it on and you're rocking and rolling, okay? So do that rush order first, okay? Get it out of the way. Next up is any job you're late on. Get those late things out of the way, because if you start working on current stuff, jobs that are supposed to ship today, but you're not working on the late stuff, what happens is the late stuff gets even later, and then it becomes a huge problem, which leads to what? Expedited freight, which everybody hates, okay? So rush, then late, and then today's stuff, okay? Get today's stuff knocked out, and then if you've worked through everything, then you can start doing tomorrow, okay? So do them in that order always, all right? All right, so let's talk about order types. Now, there's some order types here that are always a problem, which means that you need to focus your attention on these and maybe have more communication, maybe pad the timing, that kind of stuff. So let's talk about these. The first off was multi-location. I think a lot of times shops get dragged into things because they look at a job and they see it's only 500 shirts. What they don't see, it's 3 locations. So that isn't a 500 impression job. It's a 1,500 impression job, okay? And 500 of those are sleeves, and you don't even have the board set up, okay? So when we look at stuff that's multi-location, you really want to think about where you're putting it. Is it all going on the same press, or is one press going to do the front and one press going to do the back? Who's going to do the sleeve? What has to happen? And I know tons of shops who have printed the fronts and then boxed them up and shipped them. And then nobody ever printed the backs, and the client gets it and goes, what's this? So it's one of these things where if you're doing it on multi-presses for a multi-location job, you need to have lots of communication with the first press to go, hey, what happens when we're done? Oh, that goes to press 3. So they know what's going on. And then what happens when they take it to press 3? Does it go to the end of the line? Does it go to the beginning of the line? When does it have to ship? This requires you to have a lot of communication. So make sure you're allowing enough time for this to happen, because I feel multi-location jobs get shortchanged a little bit, and we always seem to have some problems with those. So make sure all your production folks kind of know what's going on. They've got good communication. They've got good, you know, like at the airport, you know, air traffic control about what's happening, okay? The next thing is, of course, rush orders, okay? Rush orders really have to have lots of hand-holding because we don't have a lot of time to screw up. If a rush order comes in, chances are they've paid for that job to be a rush, and you know, they were charged a percentage, or they were charged $100 or whatever, however your shop does it. And then we need to make sure it goes out on time and everything happens, okay? Which means those shirts have to be ordered first. That means the art has to be printed first. That means that they have to be received first and staged first, and the screens burned first, and everything has to happen first, okay? So rush jobs always get to the head of the line. The next is samples, okay? So when we're doing samples, that means that they want to see a pre-production order before they're running that big thing, okay? And to me, samples have to be printed on the same press that they're going to be printed for the production run, and hopefully by the same guy, okay? So what we need is, you can't just run a sample on a manual and then you're going to print it on your big 10 color, okay? Because what will happen is the manual guy, he'll double stroke it when he doesn't need to make sure it looks great. And then when you put it on the auto, you'll never hit it, okay? So always do your samples on the same press that it's going to run on, and that way your samples and your production job will match. And if you get the same press operator to run it, guess what? He'll remember how he set it up. So it's going to be a real easy way to connect the two to make sure that everything lines up correctly, okay? The next is anything technical or out of your norm. There's tons of people here that are plastisol only, that don't, you know, so they don't print water-based, they don't print silicone, they don't do discharge. Maybe you don't know how to do 4-color process, or maybe you're an embroiderer and you've never done applique or a puff embroidery, or you know, whatever. There's always something that comes in that you don't really know how to do, right? So if that job has to ship on Friday or Thursday even aren't the days that you need to start, okay? You need to start that several days earlier in case you goof up, in case you need to learn, you know, how much percentage of ZFS do you need to add to your discharge to be able to do it right, okay? If you don't know the answer to that question, okay, are you going to discover that the day the thing has to ship, okay? No, you need to figure all this stuff out way early, okay? So anything that's out of what you normally do needs to be scheduled early, and that way you have a hope that you can do it right. Now, just want to throw this out there. You should always be learning this, anything you don't know. And you should be scheduling just a fake order to learn how to do discharge, a fake order to learn how to do 4-color process or puff embroidery or whatever, so you can schedule it correctly. You've got time to do it. There isn't the pressure that the job has to ship. So it's one of these things. That's how you learn. You just make it part of your day like any other order, and that way you've got that education in your pocket before you need it. So that's just a quick tip. All right. So about order types, we need to funnel these a little differently. So we'll always ask why or what, okay? So what do we need? Why do we need it? What can we do differently to improve on this one thing that we really need? So how do we do rush orders better? Or how can we do a sample job better? Especially if things don't go according to how we want, okay? What can we do better, okay? And the answer that you don't want to hear is, we've always done it that way, which means you've got concrete between your ears, okay? You need to have an open mind and solve your problems by asking sometimes really difficult and hard questions. So what can we do to get better? You always want to ask that, and how we can handle these type of crazy jobs a little differently. Okay, next is really change your communication structure. Make it easy for people to understand things. You know, with our bright yellow piece of paper, you know, everybody can see that that's a rush job from across the room, okay? So if you can do stuff like that, it really helps kind of identify what do we need to be working on now. Always start earlier in every department. Just because it's a rush job doesn't mean it's a rush just for production, okay? It's a rush for everybody, because everybody's got to get that job to the head of the line, okay? So the sooner everybody does that, guess what? Maybe you have more time in production to handle it. And wouldn't that be nice if we had more time to do everything, okay? And then the other thing I want to throw out there is, if you have to do any of this stuff, okay, and it becomes a big problem, okay, I want you to ask yourself, shouldn't we be charging more? You know, one of the things that have always floored me is some shops give discounts when they print on two sides of the shirts for production, okay? So instead of charging let's say it's a one color front, one color back, okay? They will charge less for the back because somebody's quoted for the front, okay? So I just kind of always think that's a little weird for me, because you're doing the same amount of work, okay? So maybe you should charge more for that. You know, should you charge for doing samples? Should you charge more for doing rushes, okay? Lots of people don't. They just, that's how they sell, okay? But plenty of people charge for this stuff and make money doing it, okay? So you don't have to give away the store, okay? But just make sure you're getting paid appropriately. And sometimes, for instance, when you charge for rushes, the client will go, you know what? I don't really need it by Friday. Tuesday will be okay, okay? Because they don't want to pay another $100, okay? Which gives you more production time. So just, you know, kind of don't say you got to change things, but you should be thinking about it at least. All right, so this last section is setting goals and expectations. What we want to do is paint the picture of what needs to happen, okay? And we do that by knowing your numbers and being transparent, okay? So if you want your shop to operate faster, you have to communicate to your staff what is their speed, right? So if the average auto in the industry prints at 400 an hour, which is a recognized number, okay, where are you on that? Is your crew printing at 375, or are they printing at 525? So where is that? Where are you on that? Okay, if the average shop, both manual and auto, sets up at 5 minutes a screen, why does your crew take 8 minutes a screen? Okay, so if you know your numbers, you can be working on resolving that stuff, but your crew needs to know what's going on, okay? And we need to constantly review with our employees, okay? This means the more charts that you put up, the more graphs that you do, anything like that. If you've got just a simple whiteboard, here's yesterday's numbers, that type of stuff, that really helps paint the picture of, are you happy with their performance or not, okay? And if you're keeping this data, when you have your employee reviews, it's really great to share that, where they say, hey, great job, Fred. Here's your numbers from the last 6 months. You're doing awesome. Or, hey, guess what? You're not really up to stuff. We need to work on that. And how can I help you? And start getting that conversation going to help push the culture of improvement in your shop. And then you need to ask what they need to achieve the goals, okay? So maybe the equipment isn't working right, or maybe they need a tool, or maybe, you know, they get tired of walking across the shop to get a Pantone book, or whatever, okay? So if you want them to achieve these goals, you need to talk to them and find out if they have everything they need to achieve the goal. Okay, and if they don't, it's your job to get it for them. Okay, and then last is to be flexible. Okay, so production happens. What I mean by that is, if our goal is to print over 400 an hour, but guess what? We're doing bandanas, or we're doing beach towels, or we're doing aprons, and we have to iron the seam out of the middle of the apron before we can print it. Seriously doubt you're hitting those numbers. Okay, so you can't rule with an iron fist. Okay, you need to be a little flexible. You need to have some empathy. You need to make sure that everybody understands what your goal is. But maybe for this one job, you know what? Just make sure it's printed right, and we're okay. Okay, so just be flexible with how you do things and be open. A lot of the people that work for you might have a great idea about how to do something better. So if you talk to them, they might share that with you. Okay, everything doesn't have to be top down. Okay, so just to wind things up with review. So we talked about capacity, which is understanding the speedometer for the shop. Okay, do your employees have the skill to do things? Do they want to do things? And do they have the time to do things? And for our equipment, we want to know what is our average time that we're doing stuff, what is our percent of uptime, and then what is our actual technical specifications that our equipment is capable of doing. So when you know those 6 things, you can predict what your capacity should be, so you can figure out how what can we actually do every single day. Okay, so you can know and make better decisions whether you're at capacity, you're under capacity, or you're over capacity. Okay, next is eliminating the bottlenecks. Okay, these are any of your problems on your floor. Why are we having these? You keep asking why a lot. You want to eliminate your downtime, anything that's not value added. So any amount of your time that you have where you're not actually decorating a shirt is downtime on your production floor. So if you can eliminate as much of that as possible, you're going to be more effective, and you're going to have more throughput, which will mean your cost per impression just significantly drops. And then we need to review our order types. Let's look at those, find anything that doesn't really that adds more time to things, or really needs a little more hand-holding. You want to make sure you're doing those correct. And then lastly is you want to set goals and expectations about what should happen, and be very transparent with everything, so everybody kind of understands where you're going with things. So one of the things I always talk about is, if I'm in a shop and the goal is whatever our goal is, it's like climbing a mountain. It's like climbing Mount Everest. We want to paint the picture of what it's going to take to get to the top of the mountain. And today, right now, we're still in base camp. Okay, we're pitching our tent and setting everything up, but you know what we're not doing? We're not on our journey yet. So by changing some things, we're making steps to go up and climb the mountain. So we want to set those goals. We want to set those expectations, so everybody can understand what needs to happen. Okay, so that's pretty much the presentation. I've got some time for questions and answers. I'd love to help you. As always, you can email me at marshall@inksoft.com. Here's my phone number. And also, I would love to get your input on our new production manager tool that I'm helping build. So if you go to this link, which is inksoft.com/production-manager, you can get signed up, and we can get you on board. We'd love to send you information about it. But there's also a section there that you can give us your input on what you would like to see in a production manager tool. What are your top things that you would like resolved? Give us your feedback that goes straight to our development team, and we'd love to get your thoughts on that. Okay, any questions? Just put them in the questions and answer section, and I'd love to help you. I got it. One question says, how do you overcome 2 decades? I don't understand that question. So how do you overcome 2 decades of culture? Okay, so maybe here's a shop that maybe he's got an antiquated way of looking at things, and I think he wants to make some changes. How do you overcome that? Well, first thing you have to do is you have to get buy-in from people, okay? So we all have to agree on what are our problems, okay? Just because you think it's a problem doesn't mean everybody thinks it's a problem. So one of the things I might try is doing a brainstorming session where you just use a whiteboard or a big newspaper pad, and you have everybody in the room and you go, hey, what are our biggest problems? Let's write everything down, throw it all out, okay? And then you prioritize the things that stick out that everybody agrees on, and then you start working on how do we resolve these, which of these are the most important, and then you keep working from that. And that's how you build a culture of continuous improvement. It's all about finding out, what does everybody agree that there's a problem? Is it, whatever it is, you can work on that. And here's the thing that I learned a long time ago, which is man supports what he helps create. So if I just tell you, I don't want to work on this, maybe you won't get the same traction you will as if I get somebody to say, here's the problem, and we, as a team, we decide to solve the problem, and then we resolve it. Okay. All right, so let's move on. So when you say the average press should print 400 prints per hour, does that mean average throughout the day, including downtime? No, what that means is 400 prints an hour when the press is actually printing. Okay, so it's only when they're printing. Okay, so 400 imprints an hour is when you measure their production time from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, that's 60 minutes. They should print 400 shirts. Okay, so that's just an easy way of calculating that. So that's an average. Okay, plenty of shops print way faster than that. Okay, that's just an industry average, and it really has a lot to do with your stroke speed and also the size of your job. So a left chest, for example, which has only got, I don't know, 6 inches of squeegee travel, is going to print way faster than a 14-inch back. So that's why it's an average. And so use that production log and you can calculate that. Okay. All right. So here's another job question. It says, suggestions for getting buy-in from production manager who is not mathematical computational by nature, prefers to do it by intuition and experience. He thinks problem is not enough people, but it's really inefficient planning and execution. Okay. To me, that sounds like you need a new production manager. Okay. Because everything should be solved with data. Okay. Data, it's a science. You're learning to do, you can't just wing it. Oh, I've been doing it for 20 years and I think here's the answer. Well, what you want to do is you want to use data to solve it. Okay. So a good example of this is, hey, we have speedometers in our cars. Okay. So we can measure our speed and we all can do things safely. If you just cover up your dashboard and you go with the traffic, how fast, you can't predict what you're doing. Are you going too fast? Are you going too slow? Okay. By using actual science, measuring your speed, you can predict how long it's going to take you to get from point A to point B, and you can actually do it safely. Okay. So it's the same thing in our shops. When we use the data from like a production log, we can make educated guesses on how we're going to do effective change to make things work better. Okay. So if you've got an old school guy who doesn't want to do all this stuff, okay, I would start questioning, do you need him? Because if you want to make changes and you want things to work better, you need really solid answers. And intuition and gut is great, but that's not going to get you to where you want to go. Okay. So hopefully that answers your question. All right. And then do you have a list of reasonable benchmarks for impressions an hour for auto versus manual, flash versus no flash? Okay. Yeah. Well, the industry standard is 400 an hour for an auto and about 60 an hour for a manual. Okay. And it doesn't really matter if you're flashing or how many colors or anything. That's just the aggregate data. Okay. So it's always going to change depending on what you're printing on. Is it a sweatshirt? It's going to print slower than a t-shirt, that type of stuff. That's why it's just an average. And what's really important is that we measure how we're doing things in our own shops, because what you're going to find is with different presses, they're in different skills, they're going to be faster or slower than one or another, but you can establish that this one press 1, they're at 425 an hour. Press 2 is at 583 an hour. The manual is at 60 an hour for this one guy. This other guy prints it at 115. So it's like, it's all based on our skill level. But once you know that, okay, once you understand that, and you typically shops assign the same type of jobs to different presses. So a polyester job might always go to press 4, while a pocket print might always go to this. And some presses had always do sleeves. You can get those capacities so you can understand when you have this type of job, how long it's going to take to print, so you can build out that day for your production schedule so everything makes sense, so customer service and sales can't overbook it. Or you can make a decision, hey, do we need a night shift? Do we need to come in on Saturday? Do we need to start an hour and a half earlier because we're busy? Do we need to keep people till 6 o'clock? You know, you can make those decisions based on your real capacity. That's what's really important. And that's why using that understanding of what's really going on helps you kind of make these decisions. Okay. Any more questions? Let me just scroll through here. Can I get a copy of the production log? Yes, you can. Just email me at Marshall, MARSHALL, at inksoft.com, and I'll send you the file. Let's see, anything else? Okay, well, thank you so much for attending today. Let me know if I can help, and have a great day. Thank you.